Hey, everybody, happy Monday and welcome to CHLY 101.7 FM. You're listening to Act 3. Thanks again for tuning in. I have a very special guest with us today on the Zoom call. Her name is Isobel MacKenzie. You will recognize her as being our senior advocate. I can't wait to break open a conversation with her and find out what she does and how she can help everyone in our community and throughout the province of British Columbia. Welcome to the program. How are you, Isobel?
Thank you, Kathy. I'm well.
Great. I'm so glad that you're here. For many listeners, the word seniors advocate immediately is defined as somebody who looks out for seniors, really as a basic role. Can you kind of break open what the advocate responsibility is in the province?
Well, it's a statutory office of the government that was established almost 7 years ago. And the mandate is to provide information and referral. So we make sure that seniors and their family members know what's available for them. We have a 1-800 number, a website, all the usual collection of communication tools. We also monitor the services that are provided for seniors. So every year we produce a couple of reports, the long-term care directory and the monitoring report. A long-term care directory looks at all of our publicly funded care homes and looks at a
Hmm.
number of indicators, shows how we're performing year over year, where we're getting better, where we need to improve. And the monitoring report looks at about 60 some odd different service intersections across everything. So it's not just about healthcare, it's about housing, transportation, income supports, personal supports. So we monitor every year, how are we doing in terms of the obvious things, hospitalizations, long-term care access, home care access, but also how are we doing in terms of providing seniors housing? We track our BC housing shelter aid grant numbers. We track units of subsidized housing that are available. We look at the handy dart. How many rides are they giving? How many rides are they refusing? We look at the GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement. How much has it gone up? How much has the cost of living gone up? We look at the drivers' fitness tests, how many people are getting the test every year, how many are passing, which, by the way, is overwhelmingly the majority.
Hmm.
We look at a whole bunch of things. And, over time, 1 year is 1 year. What you're really interested in is what we call trends over time. And so we try to look at 5-year trends. Are we going in the right direction? Are we going in the wrong direction? And where do we need to improve? We also spend a lot of time in outreach. I spend a lot of time in normal pre-pandemic time, traveling about to a lot of different communities in British Columbia, talking to seniors, their family members, their care providers, their community support systems, to find out what are their issues. And because life is very different depending on, in some aspects, depending on where you live in British Columbia. So it's important that has been upended by COVID. I haven't been out of the office for a year. I haven't been off the island for a
Wow.
year.
Wow.
And I usually spend about 40% of my time out of the office. And but connecting through the Zoom and the different that's been helpful, but nothing quite substitutes with for talking with people directly and the kinds of
Absolutely.
issues they'll talk to you about in person.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself that when I worked with seniors in the community, it's a different element when you're with people in person. You've been at this, as you said, for 6 or 7 years now. Have you noticed any, really significant trends that have happened for older adults from 6 years ago to now?
Well, I think that we are increasingly paying attention to
Hmm.
issues that affect seniors. Now, that could simply be a reflection of seniors are growing. More
Oh, sure.
people are, we're getting older. More people are becoming 65 and 75 and 85. And so, as the number grows, interest obviously in the issues impacting seniors will grow as well. I
Mm.
think that there's going to be an interesting potential difference in how the younger seniors look at the aging process versus people who are 85 and 90 today. It's a very, very different generation,
Mhm.
a different set of expectations, a different way they live their life. That is going to, I think, mean that planning for tomorrow can't just be based on what we're experiencing today.
Mhm.
It's going to be a bit different in the future.
Can you break that open a little bit more? What I'm hearing is that, the younger generation of older adults in community, I'm hearing there's a lot more people that are involved with IT and exercise and things like that. So there's a much more youthful view on being an older adult in our communities today. So is that really what you mean when you're saying that there's a different peak, or can you just break that open a bit more for us?
I think it's more than that. I think if you think about the person who today is 85 or 90, and I use that age because when you look at where in British Columbia do people really start to show all of the issues of aging, heavy use of the healthcare system, et cetera, that's generally you're well into your 80s, and that number's been rising over the years. So if we looked at this 20 years ago, that number might have been 80 or 75.
Mhm.
So when you think about the 85 or 90-year-old of today, that's a pre-baby boom generation. These are people who were born before or during the war.
Mhm.
Um, they generally were more likely to be married, more likely to have children, and more likely to have more children than the 65 or 70-year-old of today, and especially of the 55 or 60-year-old.
Mhm.
They came of age in an era when having your own home, all of these hallmarks of independence were very firmly established. That when you're trying to convince people to would be a good idea to go to a condominium, good idea to get some help.
Sure.
I think with younger generations and younger seniors, you're going to find that they are more prepared to say, absolutely, I'm going to hire somebody to do this for me. I mean, people hire personal trainers.
Yeah.
They hire somebody to, one on one make them exercise. Of course, they're going to be hiring somebody to cook for them and clean for them if they aren't doing it already. The 85 or 90-year-old, we forget that. Most women didn't, have somebody to clean the house for them. They did it themselves.
Mhm.
A reflection actually of they were more likely to be at home as well.
Mhm.
Uh, Resources that the generations coming up are going to have more financial resources. You're going to see households that reflect two income earners
Mhm.
over the course of a lifetime versus married couples 85 and 90 and 95 who more likely reflect a one income couple. The wife who is most likely to uh, be living on her own at the end of her life is less likely to have been in the workforce than 20 years from now. They'll overwhelmingly women will have been as almost as likely as men to have been in the workforce, but perhaps not for as long.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree with you. I can see even from an 85-year-old in 2021 to an 85-year-old, in the 70s. It's an entirely we have a different image of what aging in place looks like. Yeah.
We do. And I think that, a big part of what people grapple with in aging, where people want to live independently for as long as possible. But eh, certainly what I saw in my career in home care prior to this role, and I did home care and facility or long-term care,
Mhm.
was a reluctance to have the assistance that's needed, even to maintain the independence.
Sure.
And I think that we won't see that degree of reluctance in subsequent generations that we see today.
But I also think that in the last few years, we've seen a real change in the way that residential care appears compared to the old folks' home when people were having to go there because they couldn't look after themselves anymore. Those care facilities are very different now. Have you, you've done and are well known now for doing a report, I believe in 2015, regarding the residential care as a whole. Is that correct? Was it in 2015 or was that a later document? Have you?
We've done a few different reports.
You do. That's very true. There are a number of reports. And, certainly for those people who have just tuned in right now, you are tuning into Act 3 on CHLY 101.7. Perfect time in the show as a segue to remind you to go grab a piece of paper and a pen, because we know you're going to want to read these reports. You're going to want to access the information with the Seniors Advocate. So go ahead and grab your piece of paper while we're continuing our conversation. But in regards to that report some time back, you really unpacked a lot of incredible information. Have you noticed that since that report came out, specifically the one in 2015 to 2021, have you noticed because of that report a significant difference in care?
Well, one of the things that certainly has happened in British Columbia is a significant increase in the number of care hours that are funded for care homes. That is definitely a tangible result that we've seen. Whether it is sufficient or not, that question I think still needs to be answered.
Sure.
But certainly there is more than there was. Certainly, I think the focus on the care staff, not just how many there are, and but their training and our ability to attract people to work with our frail elderly seniors. I think we've certainly seen some movement in that way. I do think, though, that if we think back, there's been an evolution, and sometimes you make progress, but you keep going, and it's not as much progress anymore. So, 50 or 60 years ago, the period of time that people had between stopping work and dying was much shorter than it is now. People now have a much longer period of time in retirement. Whether, that length of time will continue, because you have to be able to pay for the retirement years. So we may have to work longer, and there's evidence we're starting to work longer as well. But you need to remember that, first of all, uh, families would take care of their mom or dad. You would
Yeah.
go and live with your adult child.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is that a lot of times, 50 or 60 or so years ago, some seniors, when they retired, they sold their home, particularly when their spouse died. They sold their home and moved into a retirement home, or for economic reasons, not for
Good.
care needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
And just upkeep overall.
yep, our standard of living has risen significantly in the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
So, and then we started to evolve around, okay, how, more and more people were looking at um, different levels of care. I mean, in Canada, nobody'd heard of assisted living 30 years ago.
Yes.
It existed a little bit more robustly in the United States, but basically there was the nursing home, or you were in your own home. And this idea of you transition and you can go and live somewhere that's a little bit like a country club life, but with just a little bit of care. um, these are new things that have evolved over time to complement nursing homes, if you will.
Mhm.
And one of the questions, though, is when we look at our nursing homes, one of the things we started about 25 years ago was, we said, if you're in a licensed care home, we're going to have a basic one size fits all model, right? We
Mhm.
called it complex care. I'm not so sure at the end of the day. And I was in favor of it at the time. It had compelling reasons and logic at the time. But I'm not so sure in hindsight that we haven't created some unintended consequences of grouping people together who have very sometimes different types of needs.
Mhm. Yet in Europe, we're seeing that there is a real complement to intergenerational housing. How do you feel about that as a potential model for older adults in the province?
I think that there are going to be a variety of different models of how to support yourself as you age
Mhm.
that are going to be as diverse as how we house ourselves when we're younger, right? The people, the urbanites, the suburbanites, the rural people, the people who like a big yard, the people who want a no yard. Um, we're just going to be as different in our wants and needs when we're older as we are when we're younger. So I think that allowing for a co-housing model where either it's all people of the same relative age cohort, or as you say, the intergenerational, where you've got younger people, older. Europe as a culture does tend to have more family
Mm.
intergenerational integration than we do in North America. I think that part of the North American culture is reflected on the fact we are a continent of immigrants. So people moved over here and their family was somewhere else. So we created a culture that wasn't based on family, caring for one another as much. And we are geographically very big,
Absolutely.
and adult children can be significant difference distances away from their mom or dad and make it more difficult to support them as directly while they age.
And I can completely relate to that. Canada is a huge country, and my own son, who's 30 and has just presented me with two fabulous grandchildren, I feel so blessed. I'm not able to see them right now, obviously because of COVID is a big part of the travel ban and all of that. But even when older adults, so many on the West Coast, specifically on the West Coast, either their families are living on the mainland where it's very cost prohibitive for them to come back and forth, or there's economic challenges that might be associated. Other parts of the province, it's very different. Do you see within the province, because your experience is the entirety of the province, it's not just localized, although you live in Victoria, or I'm assuming you live in Victoria or based in Victoria. Um, do you see with pockets within the province where there seems to be more family closeness, or is it really not something that's been looked at?
Well, I think that we do see pockets in the lower mainland
Mhm.
with some of the multicultural communities, the South Asian and the Asian communities, where people are
Mm.
caring for their mums and dads at home to a greater degree. The extent to which that transcends generations, we'll wait and see whether it goes to
Yes.
the second and third generation, or whether this is just it's going to stop after the first generation. Will That remains to be seen. But I think that when you look at sort of our more rural parts of the province, what we are seeing is that unlike 30 or 40 years ago, people are remaining
Yeah.
in rural BC, in the north, and in the more rural parts of the interior than they used to, for a number of reasons, including the cost of relocating to the lower mainland is much more challenging now than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And we are getting services to these communities to a better degree than we did in the past.
Yeah.
And people are just, it's part of I like this community and I want to continue to live here. So there's no doubt that the ability, the aging experience is different in different parts of the province. We get a little itty bitty taste of it on the island, particularly on the South Island, when every once in a while we do have to go to the mainland for a medical procedure. But overwhelmingly, most medical procedures can be done on the island in Victoria, Central Island,
Yeah.
Nanaimo. Starts to get a little challenging as you go up island.
Sure.
But, if you live in Prince George, you're having to, which is not considered, it is a city,
Mhm.
and, fairly large and a bit cosmopolitan, but there's, you can't have a catheter procedure in Prince George. You have to go to, um, at a minimum to Kelowna, more likely you're flown to St. Paul's in Vancouver.
Yeah.
One of the things I remind people is nobody from Vancouver ever went to Vanderhoof to see a specialist. And, but we don't, I think, appreciate the degree to which the people who live in more rural and remote areas are challenged around finding specialists. So,
Yeah.
as much as driving over the Malahat may seem burdensome
Inconvenient.
for
Yeah,
people,
exactly.
inconvenient,
Yes,
it pales in comparison to having to get on a plane.
true.
And
With health
many
concerns, yeah.
seniors, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying completely. I have some friends in the interior that are very excited that they're getting a new hospital, but that new hospital doesn't mean they're going to have all the procedures. They're still going to have to drive, sometimes over really treacherous conditions, through the mountains, through the weather, in order to get the care that they need. And do you see, from an advocate's perspective, do you see, as part of your role, and I'm throwing this out here, I may be completely out of it, but it just kind of falls into that question of, you're watching healthcare change in the province, things are happening in the province. As the advocate, the office of the advocate, do you see a responsibility in helping to facilitate um, more expansion of hospital, more expansion of specialists, more expansion of doctors? Is that something that has been taken on or thought of to be taken on by the advocacy, or is that more something that the Division of Family Practice and other agencies would look into?
well, part of our job is to make recommendations to government on things they can do to improve the lives of seniors, and certainly the ability to connect with the specialists that you need to, in a way that is not overly burdensome, is important. And we look at the areas of the province where we need to figure out, there's issues where the solution, frankly, the easiest solution is when it's just about money, right? So the
Sure.
if really the issue is funding someone's trip to Vancouver, that's actually fairly easy to solve. The more difficult issues to solve are where you actually want or need the specialist to be in a particular area of the province where you simply can't get one.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, um, even if you theoretically had all the money in the world and could pay a specialist an extraordinary amount of money to live somewhere, they wouldn't have sufficient volume to keep their practice skills sharp, right? There are some
Yeah.
challenging realities. Now, technology can do a lot. It
Hmm.
can't do everything. Necessity is the mother of invention. And through this pandemic, I think there are some new ways of delivering healthcare that will remain with us and that will improve things for seniors. So, certainly, even in urban areas. So,
Mm.
the whole idea of doctors, talking to patients on the phone and doing these kinds of Zoom calls, that was never contemplated in urban settings. That's more reserved for when there's absolutely no ability for a person to get to see the doctor. And I
Hmm.
think what it underestimated was for our most frail seniors who are living at home, getting to the doctor's office is an ordeal.
Absolutely.
Um, and even though it's only 10 blocks away, it might as well be 100 miles away, and so they don't go,
Yeah.
or they don't go as frequently as they should, and things get missed, and then things compound, and now suddenly you've got a medical emergency that had you gone to the doctor. Well, now the doctor will do some visits on the phone, Zoom. A lot of times you need to see the patient. You're going to see things that you're not going to pick up in a conversation on the phone.
Hmm.
But we now have this technology that people are becoming very proficient with.
Hmm.
And so, I was speaking to a physician the other day, and practice will adapt. They still book 15 minutes for a phone visit, right? Uh, but you can, yeah, not every, the phone calls. So they can, in some ways, see more patients.
Yeah.
The ability, some physicians, particularly women physicians, which are increasingly becoming, there's more women
Hmm.
physicians,
Yeah.
you may get them to work an extra day when they can work that day from home. They can, I mean, right now, there's a lot of physicians, particularly female physicians who don't work full, don't go have 5 days of practice
Mhm.
because they have family commitments.
Mhm.
But they might be able to add to their work time if they don't have to go to their office on a particular day, and they can deal with their uh, uh, um, phone visits during that, or their Zoom or so.
Yeah.
So, there will be, I mean, I'm not, you know, the whole world isn't going to change, and for never ever be what it was because of the pandemic. These are always these dramatic statements we make.
Of
And indeed
course,
they,
of course.
we always, if that was true, everybody who'd suffered a heart attack would, become a vegetarian and go jogging for half an hour every day. And
So
they,
true.
they usually do that for about a year, and then revert back to their natural habits. So, I mean, I think
Sure.
that, but on the edges, I think that we will see some changes. I think that we've we've been introduced to some new communication technologies,
Mhm.
particularly, that I think are going to, the two arenas that I think people think of the most are obviously in healthcare, and the other is in education, where people who live in remote areas are going to have greater access than they
So
did in the
I'm
past.
actually going to jump just for a quick second. You don't have to answer this. You can jump over it. But we've all had to take a learning curve, right? All of us. Isabel, what was yours during COVID-19 and this whole new way of doing work and being connected to community? What was your learning curve?
Well, anybody who knows me knows that technology is not my thing.
Mine is.
I because of the particular work I do relative to this pandemic and the connection with I came to the office every day. I have not actually worked from home during this pandemic. During the very early stage, most of my staff worked from home, but now we're back. We have an office that can have good COVID safety protocols.
Mm.
But certainly, I think this Zoom ability. I mean, the fact that I've figured it out for the most part tells me that anybody can. I think that, so, personally, I have found the, I am surprised the degree to which the I miss the travel in terms of connecting with the people, but I don't miss it. I sort of underappreciated how much of my time it consumed.
Oh,
And it's a balancing act, because I do know that when I would go to town hall meetings and senior centers in communities, inevitably at the end, somebody would come up and have a private conversation with me that they would never ask the question in the audience. And they're not going to ask it on a Zoom call, right?
absolutely.
Because it's the same as share. They're not going to share it with everybody.
Mhm.
So that's important. But then the next question is, okay, but how many, some of the travels and some of the meetings, I'm thinking, okay, actually, um, those could be done by Zoom, right?
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting when this is over. I don't think I'll be traveling before the fall of this year. Just uh, and listening to the projections, and seniors. I mean, a big question is, how long is the order on gatherings of people going to be in place, right? Because
Yeah.
I can't go speak to a group of people if they can't gather.
No, no, not
Um,
at all.
so that's been, I think, sort of one of the sort of the interesting things. On a professional level, I think that one of the things, you reflect on, oh, yeah, lots of things about long-term care, and people like me want to say, yeah, well, we told you so, or what did you expect, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one of the things that I did not appreciate, and I don't know if others did, I certainly did not, it came to light uh, on the visit restrictions. Now, I certainly know that we undervalue families in the healthcare system, period, particularly in long term care.
Mhm.
That was not news to me. What I was surprised to learn from the survey we did of visit restrictions was the degree to which the family members have felt the burden of not being able to care. So in my work, we have focused on the burden of caregiving for a loved one, particularly at home. We focus a lot on those who are, spouses and adult children
Mhm.
who are caring for seniors, usually in their own home, and the burden of all of that. And so, what I think I was quite taken aback by was in long-term care, where you don't normally think of care, the burden of caregiving because the person's in a care home and they're getting the care, and family members come and visit a lot and they participate in the care, but it's all very willing and because you don't, you're wanting to do that
Yeah.
versus having to do it. But when they were no longer able to do that, uh, that had a profound negative effect equal to or greater than the burden that those who were providing care were feeling for their loved ones. That it is clear, and this is not everybody in long term care. I'm not even sure it's the majority, but it's not an insignificant number. It might be
Mhm.
about 30 or 40%
Yeah.
of our residents in long-term care have very close family relationships. Uh, some with their spouse, although most people, by the time they're in long-term care, they're widowed or widows, widowers or widows. But the adult children and that connection, and how um, stressful it has been for these family members for some of them, they haven't been able to see their loved one at all because they haven't been one of the designated visitors. But even for those who've been able to visit, the degree to which those visits have been restricted, even though they're allowed to visit, has had a profound effect. Now, again, it's not everybody, but I think when we talk about the trauma of long term care through this pandemic, one of the, for want of a better term, victims of the trauma are the family members. So, yes, there's the residents who live there. Yes, there's the staff. But those family members, some of them, it's clear when you read their stories, have been traumatized. And,
Yes.
we don't know how, I mean, some people are resilient, they're going to bounce back. We know that, but not everybody. We don't, you actually aren't, it's not clear who's going to bounce back and who's not. Sometimes you're surprised by who does and who doesn't.
So true.
And I know enough to know we're not the story, it'll be a year from now before we really start to see um, what, if any, long-term impacts there are going to be
Yeah.
on particularly, you know, those adult children, those usually daughters in their 50s and 60s, some in their 70s who went to see their mom or dad every day
Mhm.
because they've got many more years to live. And they're going to be aging. And how is this experience going to shape them? That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it will be. I agree. In working with families, friends, and caregivers, what we know for sure is that so often the family member doesn't see themselves as a caregiver. They see themselves merely as a daughter, a son, a loved one, another way. And so the it's I'm cautious of the word burden because I recognize the definition and how you're using it. But for those people that identify as being the daughter rather than the caregiver or the son, for them it's not a burden. And of course we know that seniors, their number one thing is, I don't want to be a burden on my children, right? They are so, or at least the seniors I've worked with over many years, they have really no desire to have that feeling that they would be taking anything away from their kids. And yet for the kids it's an honor, for many of them, and certainly not all, it's an honor to be present with the people that we love before they pass over, or just even before that they get to that, just that caring while they're in the situation, sometimes for many years. You bring up some really important points. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have just tuned in, we have the privilege of having Isobel MacKenzie, the seniors advocate, in the Zoom booth on Act 3 today. We're thrilled that she's here. She's brought an incredible amount of insight, and I have a whack more questions to ask her. but I'm hoping you've got a pen and paper handy. How do people reach out to you? I'm just going to throw that out there quickly if I can. So if anybody has been sitting with paper and pen in hand, just itching to make a note, can you give us an insight on what the contact info is?
Sure. I'm going to give a 1-800 number,
Okay.
which is 1-877-952-3181. I'm going to repeat that, 1-877-952-3181. We have a website, senioursadvocatebc.ca. And then the simplest thing to do, if you forget all of that, call 211 and they'll connect you to our office.
Of course, 211 will get you set up. Hey, speaking
They'll get
of,
you anywhere you need to go. Just
get you
call
anywhere.
211.
Call
They'll patch you through.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. I know that you were an integral part of BC 211 and the establishment of that. Could you tell our audience what that is?
I am so delighted of the government's decision to fund this. Again, I'm not sure it would have happened without COVID, but the expansion of 211. So in short order, 211, 3-digit number, you call it 24 hours a day, a live person is going to answer that phone. And that live person sits at a computer with a database that has any number of agency services all over the province. And before COVID, it was only available in the Lower Mainland. About 3 or 4 years ago, I think it got funded for Vancouver Island, but
Yeah.
the rest of the province. And if it's not all of the province, it makes it difficult to promote provincial things using that number, right? So when this pandemic started, there was a lot of, people reflect back. I mean, we didn't know what we were facing, and people, seniors in particular, don't go out of your home, don't go to the grocery store, don't, let us bring things to you. And people were wanting to help. And so we thought, okay, we've got to find a way to connect the people that want to help seniors with the people who need help. And the simplest way to do that was, if you want to help, if you need help, call 211. And the province said, yeah, that's a great idea, and we'll fund that. And indeed, I think the site, apparently every site crashes the first time you put it out. So, and what was, so we announced it, and everything crashed, got back up within a few hours. But what was very interesting was, in the beginning, we were overwhelmed with people volunteering to help. More than people needing to help. As the weeks and months, as the months went on, more people were phoning in to get help with their groceries, with their medications. And it also gives them access to this whole wider suite of services and connections through the Better at Home program. And I think being able to really, I mean, I delight now, I can just tell people, the 1-800 number is, what is that, 10 digits to remember, versus 211. It's very simple. And I'm hoping we'll see more of that will simply be the gateway. People will call that number. I'm in Duncan, I need help finding housing. They can tell you who to call in Duncan. They can maybe connect you directly, and people will be better served, I think, over the longer term.
It's my understanding with 211, because it's not fully populated yet, that if organizations and you might be able to help me with this, I'm not sure if this is true, but rumor has it that people need to, if they belong to a nonprofit agency or they belong to something that may not be part of, I don't want to call it Yellow Pages because that's pretty antiquated now, but how do people, they may not necessarily be populated in some areas of the province. Certainly Lower Mainland is very well populated now. Vancouver Island, I believe, is as well. But when you go into the interior and into the north, it's a lot less known still. So if you do have a listing that belongs to 211, just call them, right?
Yeah, so remember that Yellow Pages is actually a good analogy, dated as it might be, not for me, but maybe for some of your younger listeners. Like the ones who say, what's a record store?
Exactly.
So but it, no matter where you live, You
Mhm.
can now call the number and you'll get through. Now, the database that they have in front of them that, I'm calling from the cusp, what's available.
Yeah.
Um, there's a fairly robust database there, but to be fair, you can't, you have to know about it to get in. And so, as somebody needing the services, you will likely get directed more locally through 211. If you are delivering a service, if you're an organization or a society, you need to contact 211 to determine how you would fit in that directory, how you get described, so that the operator or the agent is able to figure out that, okay, Kathy needs to connect with that organization, right? You need the keywords, as they call it. So I think it will continue to, because it's also a website. So people they don't have to phone, they can go to bc211.ca and they can get on the website and muck around themselves and put their community in and see what shows up. It's really going to be an incredible
Yeah, I think it's a great
legacy that
resource.
we have.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a marvelous, marvelous resource. Any idea how many seniors there are in the province of BC overall? I know the numbers are changing all the time, and certainly they're rising all the time. We're expecting that, and close to 50% in some cities will be over the age of 65. But any idea what that number is overall off the top of your head by chance?
Yes, this year we passed the million mark. So we have about 5.2 million people in British Columbia, and just over a million of them are age 65 and over. And that's about 20% of the population. And it's interesting, I was just in a meeting earlier today talking about our next monitoring report that's coming out. And we're going to identify, when we see this growth in our seniors population, how much of that growth is just British Columbians aging, so you and I,
Yep.
and how much of it is people coming to British Columbia to retire, because we are above the national average. We're much older than Alberta. One of the reasons why their vaccination it seems a little ahead of ours in terms of age is because they have fewer people over the age of 8, so they can go over 75 because they have,
Of course.
we've all got you've only got so much vaccine,
Totally understand.
and if
Yeah.
you're going on age, you've got, yeah, so we have to remember that. um
Yeah,
and
we tend to
but
get a little bit
within
locked
British,
into that, don't we? We tend to sort of have this
we
as
get locked.
because it's here, it's the same in the entire country, but it's
it's
not. It's
it's
nowhere near.
And even within BC, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So you've got about 3 pockets, and one has really grown, a couple have really grown. So, if you think back 25, 30 years ago, it was really about Victoria, right? This is where the
Newlyweds and
newlywed or the
newly
nearly
dads.
dead or whatever,
That's right.
what
Yeah.
they said. But actually, on the island, the central island, the Qualicum Parksville has grown significantly. I think that its proportion over 65 is higher than Victoria.
Yeah.
And the Okanagan has grown, particularly around the Kelowna area, has created a lot of people are retiring there. Certainly, when I would go to the newcomers meetings in Kelowna, there was inevitably Alberta was a big source of people retiring because the winters in Kelowna are certainly milder than Edmonton,
Hmm.
and people would move there. So, I think that we will continue to be a magnet for retirement. We simply have the mildest climate in Canada here on the island. I think that how the island looks is rebalancing a bit, reflecting the high property costs south of the Malahat.
Yeah.
And so the degree to which we're going to see people moving out of South Island to retire up island, where they can get all the good weather, the recreation, and put a few nickels in their pocket when they buy up island versus here. I think that is a trend we're going to continue to see. I think certainly the people from Toronto coming out, they might choose more Victoria, the people from Vancouver. We're going to see, even within BC, some movement, as well as within BC, we're going to continue, because don't forget, you're going to continue to see people coming
Mm.
out here, that as people retire, what they are, just like we're talking about the housing pattern potentially changing with COVID because people can work from home. I don't think that's going to continue to quite the degree people of permanency that people think. Um, when you're not tethered to having to go to an office, well, when you retire,
Mhm.
you aren't tethered to going to an office or a particular city, and so people have this freedom to move to warmer climates, to more temperate climates in Canada. They do. And, that group of people is increasingly coming up, right? That's so, it
And I'm
is.
also seeing a trend for international folks who are over the age of 55, 60 in that area with some new programming, some new infusion. Not a lot, but we're starting to see a little bit of multiculturalism happening with some new pilot projects that the government has offered to older adults or mature adults that are wanting to bring business to community. Um, I guess we're running close to time, and it makes me crazy because I still have so many questions. I could talk to you probably all day. But I guess from the advocate's point of view, I mean, I really respect and admire your job. You have a heavy plate. What are you most worried about when it comes to the seniors in the province at this time?
I guess, well, the only issue that affects every senior is ageism because
Yes,
all seniors are different, right? When you
yes,
look at most people are never going to go to long-term care. Most people are actually not going to develop a significant dementia. Most people are not going to lose their ability to walk or lose their. I mean, most people are going to go, and they're different and they have different. But the impact of ageism, particularly when cloaked in kindness and the best of intentions. To some degree, we've seen that a little bit through the COVID pandemic, and particularly in long term care, where, with the best of intentions to quote unquote protect people, we essentially cut them off from the ones they loved and from a part of the wider world. Some people in long-term care are perfectly okay with those decisions. I mean, that's the other thing. There's not a unanimous opinion about anything.
yeah,
But over the next sort of 3 or 4 years, what I worry about is I worry about those seniors for whom this pandemic has had a deeper impact on them than they might realize.
yeah.
We may have learned a little too much about communicable diseases, and we may have, and viruses. And, there's a lot of people who go through their life with very simmering below the radar, as we say, levels of anxiety or agoraphobia or all of these other things that you can sort of keep. And what this has done is there's a group of people, many people, once the restrictions come off, life is going to resume. They're going to, talk about their COVID life. They're going to be resilient. They always were,
Yes.
those type of people. I worry more about the group of people for whom they have become habituated to a more what's the word I'm monastic life in isolation, and breaking that habit. What it will now be a habit. It's been a year.
Yeah.
It will be more than a year by the time it's over. It'll be at least 18 months. That's going to be difficult. And I worry, we talk a lot about isolation and loneliness, and it's a real issue. But one of the challenges is that group of people who, and this, to be fair, is of any age. I
Of
think
course.
it's potentially more pronounced in seniors because of how scary this virus was for seniors. We need to remember that
They were the target
there's it
audience of
they
the
were the target audience of this virus, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And so, the fear, all of these things compounding, that we are going to have to pay particular attention. We'll talk a lot about the resiliency of many, and that's true, but not all. And it's easy to mental. health issues in the elderly is sometimes a little bit more invisible, in
Yes.
part because some of the symptoms that would be more pronounced in younger people are accepted as part of what it looks like to be 80 or 85, right? And I was just speaking with our newly minted Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, who's from the island,
Yay.
um,
Island
and
girl.
an island girl, and very much aware of seniors' issues in her previous role, both as an MP and as an MLA before she was in cabinet, and very much aware that yes, we need to be.
Are you
We
speaking of, sorry to interrupt you, are you speaking of Sheila Malcolmson? Is she the new
Yes,
minister?
yeah,
Yes.
she's the new Minister of Mental Health and Addictions,
Incredible.
and so very much aware that there is the we don't know yet the lasting impact of this because we're not through it yet, right? We've got clearly there's light at the end of the tunnel. Clearly there's a dawning of the new day.
Yeah.
This vaccine is profoundly uh, uh, landscape changing because it's so effective. I think it's going to end up being one of the more effective vaccines out there. And we've seen that in our early results in long-term care. So clearly there's light, but it's still many months. And, caution, the
I'm
vaccine
with you. Yeah.
appears to be highly effective against this strain.
Yeah.
We don't know what waves are going to come and what difficulties there's going to be around whether it has to be annual vaccinations or what have you. But um, we're going to have to seriously assess our eyes and ears that we're lending to detecting what are more mental health issues amongst the elderly and less about cognitive decline and medical issues.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I, I, I have a very similar concern when I see my 86-year-old mother in love who lives next door. Those who listen to my program know I bring her up a lot because she's just so youthful and fabulous in every way. And watching her during this isolation process has really given me cause for concern over her overall mental health. And I'll be curious to see how that changes as we move ahead. As we are nearing the end of the program, and again, I am so grateful that you came to the program. Thank you, Isobel, for being here. But I'm not going to let you off the hook yet. Got one more really important. Our listeners know that I always ask this question. If there was a takeaway, if there was whether it's from your perspective as an individual, whether it is from your position or your role or your office, if you could really teach something or imbibe some piece of wisdom to our community about your experiences, what you do, what might that look like?
I think my observation is this: overwhelmingly, we care about the seniors in our lives, our moms, our dads, our spouses. Um, but if we really care about them, we will honor what they want. And that's easy when they want what we think they need. The bigger challenge is when what they want isn't what we think they need. And it is really challenging for us to recognize that in expressing our love and our affection and our reverence for the older adults, not just in our lives, but in our society, we have to listen and we need to respect that the decisions they make, the opinions they hold, come from years of wisdom that exceed our own, that they have had experiences that we can't begin to contemplate, that they've lived through tremendous change in society, in the way we've lived, and they've earned the right to determine how it is they want to live, who it is they want to live with, where it is they want to live, the risk that they want to live with. Because the most difficult thing to come to grips with is that whatever safety measures, however much of a blanket we want to wrap our folks in or our husband or wife in, um, there's no care plan out there that has a goal of care of immortality. And the and I would say that this would be a reflection of anyone in healthcare, certainly anyone who works in geriatric care, that you cannot, at the end of the day, predict or control to any great degree what your last days and hours might be like, or what it is that's going to take you on your next journey. But you can control how you live, and it's the one thing we have control over. And we don't like to surrender that uh, until it's absolutely required of us. And we need to have some introspection around that. That's what's really important. And that's really how we will show our real love and affection for the individual person that is that older adult in our lives.
I have shivers up and down my spine. An incredible reflection. Thank you so much for your wisdom. I know that everyone who's listening to the program right now is taking that to heart. I think we all want to do the best by our families and our loved ones, and we have to remember that they are the leaders for us, and we need to pay attention to what it is they need and want. Thank you for being on the program. One more time, how do people reach you?
Call 211.
That's
Ask for
what
the
I
Office of the Seniors Advocate.
I figured that's what you say. Isabella MacKenzie has been our guest today on At 3. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.